considered a health food given all the vegetables I'm consuming?
You have vegetables, you have fruit, you're hydrating yourself with the soda water. Jeff, this is health food. Yeah, there's no question. There's no question. And also, I like this because it's a nice summer drink, and with seeing so many people out on their porches and outside for this, myself and Gina and Ron and Ellen, we really wanted to, and Art, we wanted to create a relaxed atmosphere and opportunity, first and foremost, to say Toda Rabah, to say thank you to all of you for your continued support of Beth Shalom, for all that you give to Beth Shalom week in and week out and month in and month out. And since we usually like to have some sort of a relaxed get-together, this is the best that we can do in this time of social distancing. And what we're going to do tonight is we're going to have a chance for us to visit, and I'm going to share with everybody a little bit about what we've been doing since the middle of March when the pandemic hit and we went into our virtual modality. And then we're going to have an opportunity also to hear from the building committee about what's been happening with the plans for our building, and also to hear from Art and from Jason about general updates on the synagogue. And as we all know, these are the waning weeks of the Fetterman administration. And I would be remiss if I didn't begin our evening tonight, in addition to thanking you all for what all the pillars do for us week in and week out. It is, no one really understands how many hours the president of a synagogue puts into this volunteer position until they become the president of the synagogue. And despite all the jokes that rabbis like to tell about presidents of synagogues, it is an amazing responsibility. And Judge Fetterman handled this with so much grace and so much compassion and so much understanding, and came into it with already a reputation of respect and kavod from everybody in the community. And what's even more amazing is that he left the office with those same feelings. And we appreciate all the guidance and vision that you've provided, Art. And Diane, we look forward to returning your husband to you. He might have aged more in these last 2 years than you did, but we are grateful for his time.
For those of you who weren't at the annual meeting 2 years ago, you might not know that when the slate was voted on, there was one vote against it, and that was Diane. But she's come through fine. It's been a privilege and an honor, and thank you, Rabbi.
Thanks. So I think we're gonna, Gina, we're jumping into my first presentation about during the pandemic, correct?
Correct.
Great, okay. Well, let me just give everybody a little bit of background, and this is not too long of a presentation, and taking you through a little bit of the narrative of what we've been offering these last few months. And I hope that some of you have been able to sample bits and pieces of what we've been able to offer, even if you might not have been able to sample everything. And so just to take us back to the before time, if you recall, we all got together and we had an amazing Purim at our synagogue. And we were so naive. And we thought that it would be enough to just avoid handshakes and hugs, and that would be sufficient. And Purim was midweek, and by Shabbat, we had decided not to have Shabbat services. And we were going to continue with our weekday services. And by Sunday night after Purim, so March 13th or something like that, we, at about 11 o'clock at night, frantic phone calls with Jason, Art, and myself, and Hannon, we decided that this was irresponsible for us to continue to have more our daily minyan. And the next day, we all started officing from home. We missed one daily minyan, the Monday morning after that Sunday night conversation. By Monday evening, we were up having Zoom minions. And Kenahara, as my grandmother of blessed memory would say, we have not missed one minion of the daily minions, morning or evening, in these 3 months of quarantine. And not only have we not missed minion, we didn't just survive, we've really thrived during the most trying and unfortunate of circumstances. None of us would have wanted a global pandemic, but it stretched everybody: volunteers, board members, lay leaders, donors, service leaders, ritual people, staff members, maintenance staff, and clergy. It's all stretched us in new ways. We've all learned new skills and grown in different ways that we couldn't have possibly expected or predicted if you had talked to us at Purim, when we were planning what I would call a beautiful, wonderful, and typical Beth Shalom type of an evening. So I'm going to switch over to my PowerPoint now, and I'm going to give me just 1 second to start my slideshow and to share my screen with you. And if you are on a computer and you tap on your uppermost ribbon and you say view side by side, you'll be able to see me as well as the PowerPoint presentation. And you're not missing much if you're only watching the PowerPoint presentation. So the Hebrew word for a synagogue is a Beit Knesset, a house of gathering. And that's really the essence of who we are. And the strategic plan that our synagogue went through right before you hired me was that we have 3 buckets of areas that we want to focus on: community, learning, and spirituality. And those 3 pillars of where we want to engage have continued to be our focus. And I'm going to walk you through some of the ways that we've done that over the last 3+ months. First is with preschool. Our first orders of business were worrying about how we were going to take care of daily minyan, how we're going to take care of our preschool, how were we going to take care of our religious school. And so our Rose Preschool did not miss one class. We had a little bit of luck in the timing in that we had a mini spring break where we were off on one Friday and off on one Monday. And Judy Jack Spurman and her whole team, along with members of the parent group who knew about technology, were able to train the entire staff in how to use Zoom. And we also did some virtual driveway things, like with drive-throughs, like many schools are doing. So we see here this beautiful thank you teachers that we did at the end of the year. This is sort of a typical Zoom preschool class that you see the teachers and you see some of the beautiful faces of our kids, as well as the beautiful face of our director, Judy. And this is a typical classroom here with Connie Simon. You can see all of her materials behind her laptop, and this is how the Rose Preschool ran. We are now offering virtual programs on a weekly basis for preschoolers and their family during the summer. And we're waiting and seeing and looking at the numbers. We're quite conservative in the way we're approaching this to see if it's possible for us to have camp. We're not holding our breath, but at the same time, of all the programs, the preschool camp can be turned on a dime. Our Polsky Religious School is a similar story to our Rose Early Childhood. We transitioned all the aspects of PRS to Zoom without missing one day of instruction. And during the summer, we're going to be reimagining what religious school can look like without geographic limitations, because we don't know if there's going to be a second wave. We don't know if there's going to be a third wave. And so we're trying to get to the very core values of what our religious school is all about. So whether we can be in physical space or whether we have to be in digital space, we want to be ready. So we're not planning on, turning on a dime, but we have a couple months to do some thoughtful and intentional planning. And so Victor and Chazan Ben Yehuda and I are in the process of thinking about that right now. And I forgot to include a standalone slide for USY, but I'll say that also our USY chapter had lounge nights every single week, and we had great attendance. And we also connected with things that EMSA region were doing regionally. So there was a Kadima Kinus that was regional. There was a spring convention that was, that was virtual, a spring convention that was virtual. And also in these weeks following the George Floyd murder in Minneapolis, EMSA region USY, which Minneapolis is a part of, has been very active in tri-region discussions over Zoom, so teens have a safe space to share their emotional, all of their emotions about this. On Zoom, we have had celebrations, minyan, and mourning. Like I said, we did not miss one. We did not miss one day of minyan. What you're seeing in these frames are, this is what I will call a typical Zoom funeral. We've done, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but around 10 to 12 funerals, both some local and some for out of town family members since the pandemic began. So about the same number that we have in the spring any other year. None of these were directly related to COVID, but some were ancillary, where maybe people didn't call their physician as quickly as they might have because they were scared of COVID and things like this. So this left-hand corner is what I'll call a typical Zoom funeral. Over here is a live action Zoom funeral. That's Kate Leibovitz's burial. Many of you knew Kate, and she was a dear pillar and member of our congregation. Her late husband, Gene, I buried several years ago. She was married in the Warsaw Ghetto, and she lived to see great-great-grandchildren. And this is her funeral graveside, and it's being zoomed to her great-grandchildren in Israel, as well as her local friends right here. This was our very first Zoom bar mitzvah with Frankie Goldstein. This was just a couple of weeks ago, and that's their living room. And this is Ellie giving a speech about how Frankie's one of the only kids who had his bar mitzvah in the same living room where his bris was. Okay, so he had his bris in that same living room. And I told Frankie, when the time is right, I hope to be invited back to that living room for his wedding. Dave Feingold spearheaded a great group of volunteers right from the very beginning, reaching out to our most valuable. This is a picture I took a few years ago. You can see Ronnie's mom in it. You can see Mrs. Margulies back here. We see Kate of blessed memory here. This was on Pesach 2 years ago at Village Shalom. And these are the people who are suffering the most from the social distancing. And so we've been trying to keep in good tabs with them with personal phone calls, with a postcard that Art designed with greetings from the officers, another postcard that just went out teaching people how to get onto Zoom. And we're now working closely with Village Shalom. There was a donation of 15 iPads to Village Shalom. And the staff will go into the rooms to help us do one-on-one Zoom calls. And I'm in conversation with Lorena about how we can have virtual rabbi visits in the room with the individuals. And they also tune into our live streaming services now. Becca Levine, some of you may have met Becca, who is our newest team member. She does family program as well as youth programming, and a creative initiative that she started since the pandemic began is called Beth Shalom at Home. On the left, you'll see the challah making that Debbie did, where Alan was her cinematographer, kind of like my cocktails with Annie. And here is a social hour with staff that we did right at the beginning of the pandemic. People could Zoom in any day of the week to have just kick back, have a cup of coffee virtually with staff members. And every week or two, we've had some weeks two programs, some weeks one program, and some weeks we've skipped a week. But on average, once a week on Thursday nights, we have been having this Beth Shalom at Home, where different congregants share their skills that can be brought into your home. Amy Hirsch is an interior designer, and so so that's what's coming up this week if you don't have anything going on this Thursday. We have 3 connection points for Shabbat now. For the first 2 to 3 months of the pandemic, we did only Friday night and Havdalah, both on Facebook Live. And I encourage everybody to participate in any of these. The Kabbalat Shabbat is a 30-minute Kabbalat Shabbat program on Facebook Live. And Havdalah is about 15 minutes, and it's usually out of the Chazan's home, sometimes out of mine. And one of the things that we did following Pesach is we began the process of studying with the ritual committee of all the halachic, all the religious legal implications of the different methods of streaming services. And so about 3 weeks ago, we began live streaming our services. We have those now. They are streamed live from a camera in Goldsmith Hall. Chazan and I lead them. We don't have anybody else in there except for us and Juan right now. And as we get a minyan, and it's safe to have a minyan there, we'll also add Torah reading. Another great addition, and this is sort of how we've used the necessity, necessity is the mother of invention. We've not only had what I will call digital formats of the kind of learning that we have always had of adult classes and stimulating classes. We've had Melton classes, we've had Peltzman classes, we've had standalone classes. Here's a Zoom call of one of them from when I was teaching on Pesach at the very beginning of the pandemic. But I also started a program called Chavruta. Chavruta is a sacred study partnership where I bring in guests for a side-by-side program on Sunday evenings at 7:30. They're not every Sunday, but they're most Sundays, and I'm pulling back on them a little bit with the summer. And we had a great one last week not this past week, but the week before, with Reverend Vernon Howard from the SCLC and with Gavi Geller from our JCRB AJC. And not this Sunday. This coming Sunday, I'm going to be hosting Dr. Jonathan Pallant, who's a professor of choral music from Dallas, and he's also the choir director he started the homeless choir in Dallas. And he's going to talk about the effect of COVID on the homeless population, as well as what the future of singing is going to be. And so these have been really well received. They're interactive. People can comment into the comment section, and we're able to have a bit of discussion. And you can also, because it's on Facebook Live, you can go back and watch it at your leisure. And here it is by the numbers. Our Connect for Shabbat on Friday nights, we get anywhere between 50, sometimes on the low end 35, but usually we hover around 50. We've gotten as high as 75 people coming on Friday nights. But during the course of a week, we'll get anywhere between 500 to 800 views. That doesn't mean that they're watching the entire service, but it does mean that they've stopped and watched a piece of the video. They've interacted with the video in some way on Facebook. You can I'll send the analytics over to Jeff Fromm, and he can give you a whole presentation another time about the kind of touch points that we're getting. Havdalah, similar numbers but just one notch lower, but that's to be expected. It's 9:30 at night in the middle of the summer. And still, people really enjoy being in Chazan's living room, 30 to 75 people, which I don't need to tell you is way more than we would ever get for Mincha Maariv and Havdalah when it's physically at the synagogue. We get anywhere between 300 and 600 views. Shabbat morning, we are not recording it, and so we're not streaming it later. So the numbers are as is. And we've been getting, though, consistently 50 to 75 people on each of the weeks that we've been running it. And Best Shalom at home, we can stream that. We just haven't done it yet. But there's a way to stream Zoom, and we just haven't done that yet. And I think that'll be great once we add that to it. It'll, I think, get a little bit more traffic. And so we get 15 to 30 on those Zooms, and same thing with the other Zoom classes. We have not been streaming those yet to our Facebook page, but that's our next chapter in our digital synthesis. And the Chavruta programs, though, we get 80 to 150 people who are tuning in, and anywhere between 600 and this last one that I did with Gavi and Reverend Howard, at last count, we had over 3,000 views. And a lot of those are interactions and a lot of shares. So, listen, there's no question that this is a sorry substitute for being in physical space with each other. We miss being able to embrace each other. We miss being able to share a bagel and whitefish with one another. We miss being able to cry at funerals and and cry and cheer at bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs. But given that none of us would plan a pandemic, I can't tell you how proud I am of our staff and our team and all the myriad volunteers who are giving in totally different and new ways and touching people who there are some people who tragically are less connected now than before, but we also have many people who weren't connected before who are able to because of these digital formats. And our next chapters will be thinking about phasing in limited Shabbat worship as is safe as determined by our opening up committee. Dreaming into existence, a new way to welcome the new year. High holiday, don't ask me tonight what high holidays are going to look like. All I can tell you is they're going to be different. We're going to be reimagining the religious school for the same reason, and we're going to be reimagining bar and bat mitzvah. And we're going to be thinking about getting to the essence of what these experiences are and how we can provide for them best. So that's all that I have right now. And I'll stop my sharing.
Okay. So I think, Rabbi, I'm next.
I'll pass the digital baton to you, Art.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for giving really a comprehensive summary of what's happened. I'll just tell you a little bit of what the board and the officers have done. And what we've learned, I think the most important thing that I've learned really is that this is a really strong community and folks have really hung together. And I think you see that in the number of people who are here tonight, and welcome to all of you and thank you. And I think you also see it in the number of folks who are participating in the various programs that we have. As the rabbi said, it's no substitute for being in the building together, but I think we've learned some things, in particular that there are things we can do online that we hadn't been doing before. And I think that will improve our reach after, God willing, this ends hopefully soon. The rabbi did mention that there's an opening up committee, which consists of both lay people, Dr. Ann Carty, Steve Rubin, Jason, and myself, and Victor are part of it, and also members of the staff, including the rabbi and the chazan, and Judy for preschool, and Steph Williams have participated in that and are participating really every couple of weeks. We're meeting to talk about how fast we can open up and what we can be doing just on a step-by-step basis to make more connections with our people in the building, but at the same time, how, while we can't, we can continue to improve the richness of the programs that we're offering to everybody online. And as the rabbi said, we don't know where we're going to be by the time of the holidays, but we are working on that. The committee, the opening up committee, is headed by Hannon Hammer, who, if you have a chance, please thank Hannon. He's been our interim acting volunteer executive director since mid-February, and he's done a great job. And we're very, very grateful to him. Throughout this time, we've had two goals. One of them is to keep everyone who comes into our building, who might come into the building, as safe as they possibly can be. And the other is to find ways to connect with you all. And I think the staff, the rabbi and the chazan and the staff are to be applauded for the way that they've done that. The rabbi mentioned camp, and we don't know what we're going to be doing this summer. We are offering a free preschool program to the preschool kids. It's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for about an hour and a half each. Friday is going to be Shabbat singing with the rabbi and the chazan. We're going to have yoga on Mondays and some sort of an art or nature program on Wednesdays. It's again a way to connect with the preschool kids, with their older siblings, many of who know Judy and the staff in the preschool, and an opportunity to keep them close to the preschool and to the synagogue. I'll mention briefly something about finances of the shul. We've had some challenges, but I would say so far so good. We have been helped. We did get a payroll protection plan loan, which we're confident will be converted to a grant, and that's helped us some. But we're going to have some challenges probably as time goes by. The preschool, what we're able to do this fall, that'll have an effect on our finances, and certainly some of our members have been affected by COVID-19, their businesses, their jobs, and that might affect our dues collection some. So, but we are confident that between the grant from the government, with some extra help that we've had from the Beth Shalom Foundation, which we're grateful for, and because of the help of our members, we're confident that that we'll be okay going forward. And the last thing I'm going to mention, because I don't want to take too much of your time, the last thing I want to mention is that, and it's a real pleasure to say that the board has decided to appoint Steph Williams as executive director of Beth Shalom, which we're all very grateful for. Steph has been a real rock through this pandemic, a real strong leader. And many of you know that her family moved here when she was like 15 years old, and she's been around ever since. And she really knows the place inside and out. And I'm very pleased that we were able to do that, and look forward to her working with all of us for many years to come. So that's all I have. I think the protocol that we agreed on, Rabbi, was if you have questions, just put them in the chat. And we'll leave some time at the end to take them. But in the meantime, I'm going to pass the baton on to Gina Kaiser to talk about our building project a little bit. Gina.
Thank you, Art, and Mazel Tov to Steph. And I just want to follow up a minute on what Art said. If you have questions, we will try to get to as many of them as we can. If we can't get to all of them, because we want to be mindful of time and we want to conclude by 8:30, if we don't get to your question, one of us will get back to you. All right, so good evening again. I hope all of you and your families are well. As you know, we started the architectural phase of this project with a grand plan. We wanted the sun, the moon, and the stars. We were going to have a 620-seat sanctuary, an expansion of Goldsmith Hall, and a meat kitchen. Our architects drew an absolutely gorgeous plan. We all loved the design. The price tag for that plan, however, together with an endowment for increased maintenance costs, was in the neighborhood of $15 million. So we sat down and we began to reassess our needs and our priorities. We got feedback from a number of you, and we listened. And what we heard was that people wanted a smaller sanctuary. The expansion of Goldsmith and a meat kitchen were not priorities at this time. We also assessed what we thought we could realistically afford to build and maintain. So we went back to the architects, and we think instead of getting the sun, moon, and stars, we got the moon and the stars. And that's the plan that Ron Kopakin is about to take you through in a moment. As you'll see, it maintains the architectural integrity of the original plan for the sanctuary, but on a smaller scale. The new plan will cost about $9 million to build. We want to raise an additional $3 million for endowment and to retire our existing debt. So our fundraising goal is now $12 million, not $15 million. And you're going to get an update on where we are at the end of this. Oops. So as Art and the Rabbi have said, we've been physically distant from our building, but we've been virtually close. But as you know, virtual closeness doesn't replace physical closeness. I see my grandchildren in Connecticut on Zoom, but I can't hug them. It's not the same. And praying on Zoom, or even praying in Goldsmith Hall, is not the same as having a dedicated, inspiring, sacred space to bring us closer to the divine and to each other. It will take 2 years from the time we break ground to the completion of the sanctuary. Our goal is to finish our fundraising campaign no later than the end of this year and to break ground in early 2021. So with your continued help and support, we can make this happen. Thank you for all of your support up to now, for all that we do. And with that, I'm going to now pass the baton to Ron Kopakin, and he's going to walk you through a PowerPoint to show you what the new sanctuary will look like.
Ron, do you want me to run the PowerPoint from my computer?
I would like for you to do that, and then you can put it up now. Then I'm going to talk for a second here, then we'll get started. So, Art, in case you were wondering what retired presidents do, they're tapped to be the chairman of the fundraising committee. And I say, as I look through the people that we have with us tonight, I noticed that we have one other past president. I saw Gary Cortez joining us, and we're glad to have you in listening to our presentation this evening.
Kurt as well.
Oh, Kurt, I'm sorry. Kurt, I apologize. In fact, Kurt has been instrumental in helping us with our fundraising, and many of you may have seen him in your living rooms in the past, which we're going to talk about also.
And Mike is hiding behind Renana's name.
Yeah, Mike's there too.
Oh, I didn't know Mike was coming this evening, so that's why I'm surprised by that. Okay, I guess I shouldn't pinpoint at anybody. As Gina said, we kind of reassessed what we got. And one of the main things that we went back to the architect was that we loved the design that they put together for us. And when we realized that our needs were not as great as what had been drawn and our fundraising, we really, as Gina said, we prioritized this sanctuary. And what you're looking at now with this first slide, this is coming up Lamar, and what you'll see in the positioning of where the building is set. You'll notice that the Torah scroll feeling that we had in the original design is maintained, but when we move, in fact, let's just go right to the next slide. Okay, and if you look at it now, you can see how when we were coming up Lamar, it looks like it's around a building like it was originally. And then the architect pointed out to us that we could save substantial money if we maintain the round approach inside the building, but put square walls on the outside. So you'll see the walls that were originally round have kind of become square. Also, I want to point out to you, back up. Okay, I want to point out to you, I want to talk about what the drop-off was, because it was very, very important. If you all remember, if you look to the far right here, you're going to see where we come in the building now. Even though the playground isn't in there, it's kind of over to the right here. This is Goldsmith Hall that the rabbi's pointing at. But we wanted to make sure that the drop-off point was a few steps away from getting people into the sanctuary. And right where the rabbi was pointing to there in the middle is where that is. Also, you can see that they've kind of proposed this wall. By the way, just so you know, this is the drawing of the parking. This is not the limit of the parking. If you know that we have 12 acres over there, and once we get to the final drawings and plans, we'll end up with more parking. All right, let's click on. Okay, for those of you that have seen our presentations before, you will notice that we really still maintain, like I told you, round walls on the inside, and you'll see there's a reader table on the ground. There's another one above. Another thing I want to point out to you, in the original presentation, we actually had actual windows in there, and you got to imagine, if you look to the left there, you're going to see a few trees, and we don't know exactly the positioning that the windows are going to be in, but it's important that we maintain that. What you're looking at right now is having the room set for Shabbat. And you can see it's in the round, and you can see that the reader's table is in the middle, the rabbi and Hazan's chair to the left there. And let's go on to the next slide. And I want you to kind of look at it from up above, because I think it's very important to show you, if we have an intimate group of 125 people on a Shabbat, you can see the lighter colored chairs were those folding chairs that you saw, and they account for 116 seats on the floor. And behind them, the darker brown, those are the permanent pews that are in there. So we can have, sitting on the floor in a setting like this, about just shy of 300 people. Also, you can see with the mezzanine above how it looks down. And, you know, we've had some people ask us, so I'm going to share the thoughts with you tonight. People say, well, why do you just not have a bigger footprint on the floor and not even have a mezzanine? And there's a quick answer. The architect told us real quick, and that was, when you have a mezzanine like this, those, as you would call, are the cheapest seats in the house, because you can shorten up the footprint of the building. And yet, if you look at it, if you look at how many rows it is, where the rabbi's pointing, you have 4 rows of permanents down below. 4 rows are permanent. We've got approximately five rows. So no matter where you are sitting, you are very close to, you might say, the action in the reader's table. And I think that he did a great job of putting it together. And in this case, you know, obviously when we need the mezzanine. So if you have 300 seats on the floor, that's going to cover most bar mitzvahs and events that we would have. Go ahead and click, Rabbi. Okay, we're looking at the exact same view, but what you're looking at now is set up for high holidays, a wedding potentially, and you'll notice that those seats are now facing the bima instead of being in the round. And I want to point out to you, behind the permanent seats, you see some light colored seats behind each one of those rows. And those are additional chairs that the same folding chairs that we have in front, that we can add in there as well. And to give you an idea, on Shabbat, if we use this for some huge, you know, non-high holiday thing, we have about 466 seats. Go ahead. Okay, so here's kind of a breakdown to kind of show you the flat seats, the flat chairs where I was talking about, the movable chairs. The slope pews are the ones right behind them, and then you have the balcony. And then you can see we have 519 total for high holidays, 466. There is something I want you to, Rabbi, I want you to go back a couple. I want to show on the bima, I want the bima shot again. Where's the bima down shot? Is that one been eliminated? Okay, well, I'm going to tell you what's there that I wanted to point out to you. On one side of the bima, there are steps going up to the bima. On the other side is, on the right-hand side is the
right here is where the steps are, and right here is the ADA accessible ramp on this side.
Exactly. So people are older members, people in wheelchairs, walkers, whatever. Now we will have, even previously, we've never been able to accommodate people like this. And I think it's going to be open up many people going up and having an aliyah and being on the ark. Okay, and what we're looking at, this is kind of the final view of it. Again, just looking back down on it and looking at how it lays out. I will tell you that we have really, we had got together, and as all of you know, we kind of timed out on our fundraising. We felt that when we kind of put things on hold, that it was the appropriate thing to do. And we didn't want to make anyone in the congregation uncomfortable. Number two, we thought it was very inappropriate to talk about people giving money during that time. And so we kind of put it on a timeout kind of basis. I want to go on to the next slide, and I want to show you where we are in our fundraising, and then I have some more thoughts that we have. Right now, if you look, we have raised just shy of $5 million, and we have an anonymous match for 50 cents on the dollar. So we've really raised today $7.3 million. And so, you know, you talk about $12 million, but you're really not that far away, because all we have to do is raise another $3 million with the match, and it'll get us to the $12 million. And as Gina said, one of the most important things is paying off the debt. And obviously we want to make sure that we have pledges in hand before we start. And, you know, I want to talk about, because I know Gina brought up the Goldsmith Hall and the meat kitchen. And both of those projects are very important to us. But as she's pointed out, the ritual space is our number one priority. And so by dividing it apart, you know, if for some reason we did an extremely successful job and we raised the $15 million, you know, basically we got to raise another $2 million, and then there's the anonymous match would throw in another $1 million, and we'd end up with $15 million. So we've kind of divided it up like that. I will tell you that if somebody is extremely passionate about, oh my God, I really, you know, the synagogue has not had a meat kitchen since 95th Street. We have had meat events, and we've worked through having it and re-koshering the kitchen afterwards. But, you know, ideally, it'd be nice to have it. But if we have a member or a couple members who are passionate about it, that could also at any time be included in. I will tell you that we are planning from a cost standpoint of having, when we build phase one, we are going to do all the utilities and the underground stuff for when we complete the rest of the project at a later date, because it's obviously cheaper to do it, do it at this time. So the question is how do we start our project? And we've had a lot of discussions. I will tell you, nothing has been finalized, but I'm going to share with you some different ideas that we've had. One of the ideas was that, you know, we could go in and, you know, the committee, the people who would go to visit people in their homes would go do it and sit on their patios and do it, you know, outside in a safe space. Another way that it was brought up that other people who are doing fundraising now is what they would call a clean room. And that might be a room that we would have set up at the synagogue once we get back open. And we would have, you know, people in, you know, a couple people, let's say we have a couple people soliciting, a couple in there, and then, you know, we'd make sure that it was safe. And then after they were done, it would be completely cleaned before the next people come in. And the third thing is, you know, we could end up doing some on Zoom, and we're very concerned about everybody's well-being. And we think that it's the time is now to get us started, because as Gina said, that, you know, we're 2 years out once we get started. And, you know, believe it or not, we may catch a break in that from a cost standpoint, there may be some savings with us getting this thing done sooner rather than later. Anyway, that's where we are today. We're very excited about getting this thing restarted. And with that, I think that we want to kind of, our goal was to have you done in an hour, and we're very close to it now, but I think that we'd like to address the questions and any questions that are there. And I think that either Ellen or Steph are kind of sorting through those, and I'm going to turn it over to them.
If anybody has any questions, you can put them in the chat window, or I can unmute. We have a large group tonight, so just unmuting and shouting out questions doesn't work great, but I can put us on, let me take us off speaker view, and you can also just physically raise your hand if you have any questions too.
Okay.
I can't believe we answered everybody's possible question.
Either that or we've bored everybody to tears. I hope not.
The Freed family points out that a request for a covered walkway, a covered portico, given our weather, why isn't it there now? I can't answer why it isn't there now. And the area that, hold on just a second, let me just go back to.
Actually may be there. I'm not 100.
No, I'm sorry. It is there, kind of. We can just expand. Let me just share it really quick.
It is there.
Yeah, it is there, but it's just not a long walkway. But as you can see, the area right over where we are. So, but we can talk to Scott about just expanding this, this covering,
Walkway.
over the walkway as well. We have very little walkway. I thought that what Ed and Sandy meant was, why don't we have it now over here, which we don't. And I don't know why we don't have it there now, but we will make sure that when we give feedback to Scott to see if we can extend that overhang to right where the cars drive in. And let me.
Great suggestion.
Yeah, thank you.
That's really great. Thank you.
very much.
Thanks for noticing that.
Okay.
Let me just, if I can just say before we have any sort of a wrap up and a closing and people run their different ways, I want you to know that even though the building is not physically open, the synagogue very much is. And my friend Rabbi Josh Heller, who's in Atlanta, when there were these pronouncements from the federal government that houses of worship must reopen, he wrote a beautiful piece, and he says, we can't reopen. We never closed. And I really feel that. I really feel that we have tried to be there for our members in the best way that we can. But what's missing in Zoom, and we've seen this in classroom settings when our kids have taken Zoom classes, is what's missing is the informal intimacies. I see it with my kids where there's no modest way to ask for help in a classroom when you're in Zoom, because you can't just hang back after class taking a few extra minutes to put your books in the backpack, and then the teacher can come over and say, hey, how are you doing? And similarly, in synagogue, we can't keep our eyes out for that person who hangs back after minyan and takes a little bit longer to put away their talis and tefillin, or the person who comes to Saturday morning services and has a new name that they're adding for the Mishaberach list. We can't have our antennae up in the same way. So we really count on you, the leaders in our synagogue, that if you know of somebody who needs that extra little TLC, that extra little bit of outreach, that phone call, that email, or if there's a place where, a parking spot, if you will, where you think that they might find comfort, please feel free to reach out to them and digitally go with them. Come to the Monday afternoon Torah discussion. Come to the let's go to Facebook Live together for the Friday night service. And those types of things really make an impact. How many people have you contacted, and how many do you have left to know if this is a realistic number? Sandy, are you talking about the outreach that we've been doing, or are you talking about the fundraising that we've been doing?
I was talking about the fundraising. Obviously, you've reached to a lot of us to do fundraising. How many people do you really have?
I'm going to turn that over to Ellen, Ellen and Jeff, and they might have a better idea of the exact numbers on that.
I will tell you that we know that we have a number of people left to contact Some of those asks were in progress as we shut down in the middle of March. We had some meetings with those people already, but had not concluded that transaction, shall we say. We do think, Sandy, based upon how many people we know we have left to contact, we do think this is a realistic number.
Yeah, our contributions are from, I believe, around 60 families.
A little more.
Yeah, but something around 60 families so far. And we have a congregation of more than 600.
And Sandy, the real answer is, realistically, we've gone through that and feel very comfortable in raising that $12 million number.
And
Ed had a question up above mine, so I don't know what it was about when they did the original building construction.
I don't know.
The building in the chapel had to be canceled. The footings, maybe utilities were put in. Do I remember?
That was not.
I don't think that's accurate. Ed. I don't remember. But Gary was on the call. Is he still on the call? But I don't think that there is plumbing and electricity.
And Gary is on the call.
yeah, I don't think so.
Gary, there's not a foundation for electricity and HVAC and stuff like that underneath the ground, is there?
No. Well, there is a conduit that runs from back where the electrical service is that goes through underground to the, I believe the original connection was roughly where the door that goes out to the north.
But not beyond that.
But not beyond that, no.
Okay. And there's no footings.
There's no
There's no footings. There's a lot of rock out there. There's no footings.
Right.
But I will say to that is that we did talk to the builder and to the architect about when this construction happens to put in all the piping, electricity, and plumbing that would be needed for a kitchen addition, so we wouldn't have to break into the foundation again if we decide to do the kitchen at a later date. And actually, our local architect and builder said we might be able to do a kitchen at a later date at a less expensive cost than what our sanctuary architect designed.
Okay, we should wrap it up.
Yeah, we should. We're 4 minutes over.
I want to just say, again, thank you to Art, and I also want to say welcome on to Jason Krakow, who is our incoming president, and we look forward to working with him afterwards. And I want to thank Ellen and Jeff for all of the help and guidance and vision that they've been giving us on this campaign, and the tireless efforts of both Ron and Gina, who have been working so hard on this. And Gina, you know, she's been, you know, sort of working on this project, I think like about 1978 or so was when she actually began.
Thank you to Mike Abrams for that.
Yes.
If there are questions that we didn't answer, if you have questions afterwards, we will get you an answer. We'll get you an answer.
Thank you for all of you for everything.
Thank you all. Thank you all for your participation and for your support.
Right. Okay. Feel free to email me or put it in the chat box, and I'll make sure that the questions are answered.